Welcome to True Crime Cases. The life of Ryan was characterized by integrity, diligence, and strong sense of devotion to his family. A businessman who rose from poverty. Initially, he began his own import. An export business laboriously constructed it from the beginning and obtained a repute for being impartial, reliable, and adored by his family, esteemed and admired by his staff, by his neighborhood. But it was his connection with Jace, his only son, that most described Ryan. Was a loving father, giving his everything to, influencing Jace's future in the same way. Principles and fortitude he had always upheld. As a child, Jace admired his father's commitment, his endurance, and the utter Ryan's fortitude even when things were rough. Ryan always gave Jace's conviction that life was about options, that one might always decide to act morally even when it is incorrect. Jace thought it was simpler because his father was. He was more than simply a man. He was a mentor and anchor, and a constant supply of power, compassion. Their relationship was solid, and relationship based on love, trust, and admiration. But the uncertain nature of life, this item would soon be broken by nature. Jace had no idea that his father gave him strength would eventually be used as a weapon, and cursing the thing that would push him to actions that he previously could not have predicted. Ryan had a little company, but therefore he concentrated on bringing in rare and unusual goods that often traverse nations to obtain distinctive goods. Despite his achievements, he earned a fair life. Furthermore, attracted the interest of local criminal males looking to make quick money via coercing or extorting people who had earned their wealth via hard effort. Ryan had gotten away from their dangers, being hidden from any actual risk for years, but eventually everything changed, and Ryan was given an unexpected visit from a local lawbreaker group under the direction of Miguel MC Ross, vicious individual who saw humanity as stepping is all that Ryan is, archer and stones to his own prosperity. His guys were aware of Ryan's accomplishments, and their goal was to collect a tax. The amount of money Ryan would be compelled to make ongoing payments for alleged Ryan protection from other criminals. Brave and principled, he declined, quietly stated that he would not make 1 cent for something he didn't own, trust in, and that he had no fear of. To Archer or his guys, the concept of extortion was disgusting and straightforward. Conflict with all of his beliefs in and had been employed by Archer, but was a man who shouldn't be rejected so quickly. Ryan was working one evening. Archer arrived late in his little warehouse office, and his 4 men pursued him, designed to intimidate him into submitting to make him acknowledge his error by declining their offer. But what started off as coercion rapidly got out of hand. Ryan, fearless even when things are dangerous, Lynch refused to bend down and didn't flinch, declaring boldly that he would never be forced against his will to do whatever. Angry by Ryan's opposition, Archer directed his soldiers to provide an example of. The abuse was unrelenting and ruthless. It was more than even Archer had planned. But when they became aware of Ryan's dead corpse was the result of their actions on the chilly warehouse floor, crushed. A man's strength and dignity are undermined by vicious guys who are solely familiar with violence. Ryan is left behind by Lady without second thought after learning about it from Jace. The news of his father's passing devastated him. In his world, he was a young guy of just 17. Continuously developing and learning from his father was his hero, and he no longer had that idol. Cruelly removed from him by the people, he was unable to comprehend the anguish, massively devouring him like a forest fire. However, that sorrow was accompanied with another, experiencing a more sinister and pernicious vibe. Rage. Not only the loss of the way his father was what caused the hurt. Taken the information that males had selected to kill his father for no other reason than reasoning beyond power and greed. Jace, filled with a fierce rage that he found it difficult to control the notion of the previously vibrant face of the father. His day was tormented by the warmth that was gone forever. At night, Jace made a self-promise to. He resolved to find out who did this. He would somehow make those replies accountable for their deeds. The following years were difficult. Jace decided to take over his father's business to preserve his heritage, yet he had a heavy load to bear and was plagued by his father's recollections by the ideas Ryan had imparted to him. However, he longed to pay tribute to his father's lessons. His rage, beneath the surface, hatred festered, feeding a darker side of himself each time a portion of the company reminded him of Ryan's interactions with an elderly colleague. All of the documents he filed and each customer he interacted with was the distressing reminder of the guy he had lost. Jace was no longer only a young guy. He was now Jace, learning the ropes. The Avenger is troubled by his own ghost. Father, motivated by a sense of obligation to deliver justice to as he grew up with older Jaces, changed his manner. He was no longer his father had previously had a bright, optimistic son. Raised, he nearly grew aloof and reserved. Merciless in his decision in the outside world, he was a quiet, hard worker, businessman, but there was a tempest inside of him. Increasing anger, which prompted him to spend restless evenings spent planning, strategizing, and getting ready for the day he would arrive at The killers of fathers are definitely here. The next section shows Jace's calculated, arduous journey as he finds his father's murderers. I'll go on to the same more gradual, dramatic narrative development, each character's richness and conveying Jace's development as he seeks. By the time Jace arrived at he was a man in his late 20s. Changed, and the open trust was gone. A young guy reared by his father took the position of by a colder, more focused, and calculating person. By a single, Jace's goal was to spend years not just mourning whilst painstakingly getting ready in. He had the solitude of his own thoughts. Created a mental revenge map, connecting the pieces of data he had acquired regarding each of his father had been taken by 5 guys. He was aware that the hunt would need patience, slyness, and brutality. For years, Ryan's passing had been considered a case that the authorities closed. The absence of witnesses and hard proof had caused the authorities to abandon the inquiry, describing it as a sad mystery that hasn't been solved. But Jace wasn't. The same restrictions that he wasn't requires simply an ironclad and legal proof. Perseverance along the years, Jace had covertly employed private investigators, gradually gathering data about each of the 5 guys in charge of his father's passing. He researched them, meticulously learning every aspect of their life, picking up their habits, and recognizing their weaknesses that they had eliminated. Opponents without a face, but strangers to him. Villains he was close to and who had developed into extensions of the evil that had destroyed the gang and his life. Of the guys who had killed his father, each member of the MLY crew had their own dark. In the middle was Archer Rios, the individual with a reputation for being frigid, relentless drive, and aptitude for control other people. Archer was a former. Years of incarceration hardened the offender, and, motivated by an unbridled avarice, his faithful goons, 4 men who had either intimidated or enticed by mixed promises of power and money for each, have their own shortcomings and misdeeds. The first was a lanky guy named Lucas Ortega. Having a taste for gaming and serious cocaine addiction, he was often influenced by promises of quick cash, and later played as a mixed right-hand man. There was a wiry Simon Delgado, twitchy figure whose area of expertise was. Thomas Ruiz was the third victim of intimidation. Mechanic with an assault history, but strongly devoted to Archer, viewing him as a way to get out of his poverty. Jose Montoya was the final person, a man who frequently served as the group's cleaner. Called to hide their whereabouts, Jose was renowned for his capacity to disappear, obliterate a talent that had maintained. For years, each individual was kept beneath the radar, played a part that evening, and each bore. Jace viewed them as five in terms of duty, fragments of a single, hideous thing, and, in his opinion, they weren't people with their own families or lives. They were just further manifestations of the evil that had deprived him of both Jace and his father. They had given up their claim to mercy. The weakest of the five is Lucas Ortega. Turned became Jace's first. Take aim at a gambler and cocaine addict. Lucas had a habit that caused him to. Jace, who was predictable, learned everything. Move, observing him from a distance and discovering his shortcomings and savoring his cold. Jace made his move on a misty night. Watched as Lucas stumbled out of a drunk in the pub and unaware of the surroundings in the dim lane. Jace hit his approach quietly, his motions accurate. Lucas didn't see him enter. Jace had quickly restrained him. Lucas's throat was encircled by hands as he looked into his frightened. Ryan de la Cruz comes to mind. Jace spoke in a chilly whisper. Lucas's emotionless eyes grew wide, and he let out a frantic cry, but Jace didn't pay any attention. In the last twist, he killed Lucas. Jace was the first of the five to die. Felt an odd serenity descend upon him. Had begun the process of exacting revenge. Lucas's corpse was left by his father in the alley to ensure that there is no trace connected to. He had researched forensic techniques, figuring out ways to avoid leaving any trace. A body would be discovered by the police, but they would discover no. Hence that Simon Delgado was more stern. For his methods of intimidation, Simon was a commanding presence, always accompanied by bodyguards, but Jace stood his ground. He spent weeks observing Simon by his side, discovering his patterns and recognizing his. Jace hit one of the flaws. Simon was alone himself at his house that evening. He had let his guard down carelessly. Down following a particularly successful, Jace quietly broke into the deal, catching. This time Simon was caught off guard and He didn't have to talk since Simon could saw his eyes and realized that he was confronting death. Jace quickly and cleanly put him to death. Planned murder that left no mess behind. Evidence when the cops showed up. He vanished, vanishing into the night. Tomas Ruiz was odd, like a phantom. An experienced technician with a track record of. Tomas was violent, powerful, and street. A clever guy who had fought his way to survival. His infancy, Jace was aware that he would require an alternative strategy with Tomas rather than a face-to-face conflict. He chose to take advantage of Thomas's. Jace approached with a sense of pride and conceit. Him pretending to be a technician in disguise. He worked for weeks in search of employment. Together with Tomas earning his confidence, awaiting the ideal time at last. Jace was at the store while Tomas was by himself. Made his move and let Tomas to see it. His expression made it clear to him who was. Tomas struggled back to terminate his life, but Jace was prepared following a vicious battle. He came out on top and left. Thomas's corpse was lying on the Jose Montoya, the mysterious cleaner, on the floor. Has always been watchful and careful. Jace knew he would look over his shoulder. Need to use extra caution with Jose. He followed him around for months. From one city to another in search of a position. At last, in a little, remote town called Jose, allow his guard to. Jace went down and faced him in abandoned location in the outskirts, distant from. Observers report that they attempted to flee, but Jace was quicker and more focused following. Furious chase, he surrounded him and handed the same justice that he had. Jose's passing was such a shock to the others. Execution that was calculated and left no trace. Jace left, calming his thoughts. Mission almost. Full MC Rios served as the focal point of the individual who had planned the operation. Jace protected him from the murder of his father. Lastly, wishing to relish the opportunity to make sure Archer knew why he was there, he discovered Archer living behind an pseudonym in an isolated location, evading the law. Archer's location was the most difficult to get to, shielded by many security tiers, cut off from the outside world. But Jace had come this far, and he had no intention of give up pretending to be a repairman. Jace was able to enter Mix's compound, taking one stride around his security. He eventually arrived at Mix's private areas that surprised him and caused certain he was by himself before disclosing his real name. You recall, Ryan DeLay? Cruz asked in a composed yet animated voice. Archer's face twisted with lethal purpose. Horrified when he recognized who was standing, he attempted to fight before him, beg, but Jace persisted in slow, deliberate act of retaliation. He concluded Archer's life, relishing the last occasions as the one in charge of his father passed away, taking his final breath with. After completing his duty, Jace realized he couldn't remain, thus he had to vanish to leave no evidence of the person he was. Has made preparations for this occasion by acquiring fake documents under a new identity. Upon organizing his getaway, he relocated to Argentina, is a place where he can fit in, disappear completely into the mob. He began a peaceful life with his new persona, burying his old memories in his life, in his own heart, the guy who had been. After Jace D. Cruz passed away, a ghost who was always in the shadows, inconspicuous throughout the years, the 5 men's killings were still ongoing. Solved a mystery that plagued the officials. They were never able to locate one. Hint, a solitary piece of proof that possibly identified Jace's murderer. Carried out his strategy with accuracy, departing. No traces, no witnesses, no fingerprints. He transformed into a ghost in Argentina, who had exacted revenge for the death of his father, disappeared into the world. The myth of the son of Jace Ryan, who took vicious retaliation turned into whispers. Tale that no one could ever solve. But Jace felt in his heart that justice had served. He had respected his dad's recollection, provided the reckoning that had been due, and he now led a tranquil life. A guy without a history, identity, or apologies.